MSW Media.
The rule of law is not just some lawyer's turn of phrase. It is the very foundation of our democracy. The essence of the rule of law is that like cases are treated alike. That there not be one rule for Democrats and another for Republicans, one rule for the powerful, another for the powerless, one rule for the rich and another for the poor, or different rules depending upon one's race or ethnicity. To serve as Attorney General at this critical time is a calling I am honored and eager to answer.
So now it's clean up on aisle 45 time. And for a long while yet, it is going to be clean up on aisle 45.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 171 of Clean Up on Aisle 45. It's Wednesday, May 1st, 2024. I almost nearly have 100% of my voice back. I'm Allison Gill.
And I'm Pete Strzok. As usual, we have a lot to cover today, including the key takeaways from week one of the Trump 2016 election interference trial, the first criminal trial of a prior or current president in our nation's history.
Yes, and we will summarize all of the state cases for you against the fraudulent electors. And a quick shout out to our patrons who came out last weekend to our gala in D.C. Thank you to those who helped volunteer with me at the So What Else food pantry earlier in the day on Saturday. I had an incredible time helping pack groceries for local families in Maryland. So What Else could use your help for the amazing work they do, and there'll be a link in the show notes where you can support their good work. And we have some new patrons to thank this week as well, including Fred Farkle, Callanish, Vicky Weibo Uhays, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Colin Rudd or Rude, Jesse Hazelwood, Frank Franz, and Marquise Blakesley. So thank you very much for your support. Thank you for supporting independent media. And it's because of you that we can do this show. Seriously, we couldn't do it without you. And your support is just overwhelming and humbling. So thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, so let's kick off the show with some of the highlights of the first week of the Trump trial in Manhattan. We saw testimony from three key witnesses, including David Pecker, the owner of AMI and the National Enquirer, Rhona Graff, known as Trump's gatekeeper, who's worked for him since 1987, and a banker named Gary Farrow.
1987. That's like right around the time I was watching a bunch of John Hughes movies. I think I was 14.
I graduated high school and headed off to college. That was a long time to be working for Donald J. Trump.
So yeah, she's been working for him since forever. So the gatekeeper, right? She was there when all the checks were signed. She was the reason that Trump never used emails or texts, right? Because she was his fax machine, his Rolodex, his emailer, texter, everything went through her. So Pete, why do you think they kicked this off with David Pecker? They kept the witnesses close to their vest until the very last minute, so that Trump couldn't come out and intimidate them publicly. But why do you think they kicked this off with Mr. Pecker?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, any good prosecutor, what you're doing at trial, the prosecutor's telling a story. I mean, they've got to lay out the crime and the elements of the crime and show how the evidence proves that the accused person did all those things. But we are going back to our ancient roots of sitting around the fire telling stories. We love stories. We love to tell stories. We love to hear stories. And so if you're a prosecutor, what you want to do is bring in the jury from the beginning and sort of set the stage, right? You're going to go, and ideally you want somebody who has knowledge about a lot of the things that you are going to lay out. You want somebody who is somewhat well-known and interesting, but you don't want like your star witness. You don't want somebody who's going to be controversial. If you're going to hear from Stormy Daniels or certainly Michael Cohen or potentially Karen McDougal or Hope Hicks, you don't want somebody that's immediately going to be like overwhelm the jury with controversy or the star-studded power. You want somebody who can get up there and reasonably credibly talk about what they know, but essentially it is the person saying once upon a time. And they lay forth sort of the setting in which we find ourselves about, in the Trump empire and what he was trying to do and why the story that the jury is about to hear, why it's relevant, why it matters, all in the context of the criminal violation. And so David Pecker is somebody who does that very well. I mean, he was key to this entire process. He had a long relationship with Trump. He has an interesting, it still appears, I mean, at some point the reporting was they sort of waved to each other across the aisle, but that's what you want from your first witness.
Yeah. And you brought up a good point when you said credibly relate the story, because I think that David Pecker is a very credible witness, right in the heat of everything. But when you compare him to someone like Michael Cohen, who has been convicted of perjury and was convicted of the campaign finance violations back in 2018, thanks to Bill Barr, you're not going to get a lot of people being able to impeach Pecker as a witness. And we did learn from his testimony, I think it was on redirect, that he signed a non-prosecution agreement with the Manhattan DA when it was Cy Vance way back in 2019. That was after the whole investigation was put on pause for like a year after Bill Barr told Jeffrey Berman in the Southern District of New York to tell the Manhattan DA, hey, you don't need to investigate anything. We're doing it here on the federal level, and then proceeded to sit on it and do nothing for a year to prevent it from falling into the hands of the Manhattan District Attorney. And then once they got that green light, the subpoenas started flying within days, and they got that non-prosecution agreement with Pecker and Dylan Howard. Dylan Howard can't testify because he's having spinal surgery, I think, who he was a lawyer, one of the lawyers for AMI, working closely with Pecker on these catch and kill stories and hush money stories, checkbook journalism, they called it on the stand. We'll get to that in a minute. But, they did also sign a non-prosecution agreement with the feds back in the day. And we reported on that during the Mueller, She Wrote podcast, because as you know, this whole investigation was born in the Mueller investigation. And so that was handed off to the Southern District. And then, like I said, Southern District, through Bill Barr, prevented it from going any further. And we would have lost on statute of limitations, except for the fact that Governor Cuomo, I believe, told all criminal prosecution statute of limitations because of the COVID pandemic. So had Donald Trump actually handled the COVID pandemic in a better manner, they might not have been able to charge him at all. And his scheme, I think, with Bill Barr to keep this all from coming out and being criminally prosecuted might have been successful.
Yeah, and the funny irony, and by funny I mean not funny in the least,
funny peculiar,
is that Bill Barr was engaging in like a DOJ version of a catch and kill, right? I mean, that's exactly what he did. He's like, oh, we're going to look into this case. State authorities, don't worry about it. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. And then proceeds to do nothing. It is a catch and kill. It is a federal criminal catch and kill to get it off of the plate of state authorities, and only, fortuitously did we end up in a spot where now Alvin Bragg is able to bring the case. But that's one of the many ironies that have struck me in this trial. But like, look, going to David Pecker and his catch and kills, his role was to describe the conspiracy. And essentially he said, look, there was an agreement during a meeting with Hope Hicks, Trump, Cohen, and Pecker to print positive stories about Trump and negative stories about his political opponents. And the conspiracy is important because it's one of the three underlying crimes that create the foundation for elevating the falsification of business records from misdemeanors to felonies. And like the overt acts in a RICO case, or the RICO case in Fulton County, prosecutors don't have to prove those underlying crimes beyond a reasonable doubt, nor do those crimes have to be charged in order to get a conviction for the business records. Now, the prosecutors made clear that it's the New York law that makes it illegal to conspire to impact the outcome of an election that's at the heart of this case. The two other underlying crimes are federal election limits on in-kind campaign contributions and the potential New York tax evasion by Trump paying back more than Cohen lent him in order to pay off Stormy Daniels.
Yeah. And I think Pecker helped lay that out really well. He testified that he promised to serve as the eyes and ears of the Trump campaign, specifically the campaign. And he promised to publish, like you said, those positive stories about Trump while simultaneously attacking his rivals. Pecker said he would tell Trump's attorney, Michael Cohen, whenever he heard about women shopping stories about Donald Trump. And Pecker explained while he was on the stand why his firm, AMI, American Media Inc., paid $150,000 to former Playboy playmate Karen McDougal to keep quiet about her claims of a year-long affair with Trump. Now, on cross, Bove, who, by the way, is probably one of Trump's better lawyers, tried to debunk the election influence attack. He suggested that Pecker made similar deals with other celebrities without any political considerations. But I think that was a pretty weak sauce defense, Pete. The conspiracy agreement was clear. The NDAs and the hush money payments were to help get Trump elected. And Pecker detailed an unsavory world of, what he called checkbook journalism at the Enquirer, whereby they paid sources for their stories. And he had a whole safe full of dirt on celebrities. And he willingly served as an extension of the Trump campaign. And I had never heard of checkbook journalism until this. I mean, I kind of got the gist of it. I didn't know it had a name. And Pecker helped drive the intent home, Trump's intent home, by saying the Enquirer could have actually made a lot more money by actually running the stories about the doorman who said that Trump had an out-of-wedlock baby with someone, or the Karen McDougal story, or the Stormy Daniels story. I remember a guy named Lachlan was on with, I think it was Nicole Wallace on Deadline White House, saying he was working with them at the time, saying, yeah, this was not good business. This was all to benefit the Trump campaign. Good business would have been to run these stories, would have made it mint. We would have controlled the 2016 election, he said. And so that cuts against Bove's idea, or the Trump camp's idea, that this was somehow not campaign related. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it was interesting because a lot of Pecker's testimony centered around the silence of Karen McDougal, which makes me think she's going to be another key witness for the prosecution that we may even see take the stand this week. And I think I can only wish to be a fly on the wall, because I think far more than Stormy Daniels, the impact on Trump's domestic happiness, Karen McDougal has the potential to throw that into much more upheaval than I think Stormy Daniels ever could. But to that end, Pecker said, look, I believed McDougal's account, and I talked to Trump before I agreed to pay $130,000 to buy her silence. He also agreed to run 96 columns by a ghostwriter attributed to McDougal, and that had put her on the cover. They ended up running 65 of those stories. Now, Trump's lawyers argued that it was just a favor to help give her career a shot in the arm. After his election, Trump invited Pecker to the White House, where he also asked about McDougal's well-being, saying, quote, "How's our girl?" unquote. Pecker said, "She's doing well. She's quiet. Everything's going good." Mm-hmm. Pecker also described how Trump was angry when the McDougal story went public. Trump called him on November 5th, 2016, 3 days before Election Day, when the Wall Street Journal published a story about the AMI agreement. Pecker said that Trump was very upset, saying, "How could this happen? I thought you had this under control." In fact, Trump was worried about his leaky Pecker. Right? The jokes write themselves, right?
They do.
Pecker testified that after he paid for the McDougal and Dorman stories without getting reimbursed, Pecker had no more appetite to pay for stories involving women and Trump, and was reluctant to pay for Stormy Daniels' story. Just like Trump, not paying his bills, and it cost him in the end. And that he therefore, and again, Pecker setting the stage for why Cohen, not Pecker, why it was Cohen who had to take out a second mortgage and pay her rather than Pecker doing it, because Pecker said, "You haven't reimbursed me. I'm done. We're not going to continue this."
Yeah, he got very, very frustrated, apparently, according to his testimony, that he wasn't getting paid. Trump wasn't paying his bills. Big shocker. And so that's why Cohen went across the street to First National Bank or whatever and took out actually a home equity line of credit, like a second mortgage on his house to pay this.
Like all reputable attorneys do. Who, I can go down the list of attorneys I know who pay for their clients' expenses by taking out a personal HELOC to. It's nonsense, right? I mean, it just doesn't happen. I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah. Yeah, and Bove, who, like I said, is probably one of Trump's better attorneys, he's actually his SEPA expert, and using the fact that Bove is participating in the New York trial to try to get Judge Cannon to delay the Mar-a-Lago trial, But Beauvais really tried to poke holes in Pecker's credibility. And yes, I did type out the sentence, poke holes in Pecker's credibility. But he failed pretty handily. I know a lot of folks, when these questions were first coming out about, AMI running catch and kill stories on all kinds of celebrities in the past, Tiger Woods, Arnold Schwarzenegger, everybody on TV and the pundits were like, this is going to make it seem like this is the normal course of business. But when you add the campaign into the mix, on redirect, Pecker was asked specifically, did Trump ever mention his family? Was he trying to bury these stories for his personal street cred or to keep his family from finding out or anything like that? And Pecker was like, nope, this was strictly to help him win the election. This was 100% about his campaign. And I don't think that I should say that I think the prosecution's lawyers on redirect did a good job of cleaning up on that. And I don't think, at least it's my general feeling, that Beauvais was able to discredit or impeach David Pecker in any way.
No, I think that's right. I mean, I worked when I was in the Bureau, had the counter-espionage section. I worked a case up in New York where Beauvais was assigned as one of the prosecutors. He does have some, I mean, what's interesting is I know he's there because he has some CPA experience, but he wasn't assigned to like NSD at Main Justice where day in, day out, all he did was CIPA and classified litigation. He had some exposure to it, and it's not like he's never had experience, but it's not like he was, constantly making his bread and butter with perpetual CIPA work, because there just isn't, in any given U.S. attorney's office, there isn't that much there. So, for sure he has some exposure there, but he was a legit prosecutor. I didn't, I wasn't in the field office working with him, but he was a, legit prosecutor. So having said that, the interesting thing I think for people who are listening to the trial is that you do have competent attorneys on both sides. You'll notice the stunning absence of Alina Habba, who I think it's her turn in the barrel right now. But when push comes to shove, where you're facing jail time, to Trump's credit, he's got real attorneys in there. They may or may not be doing that well. They may, have the judge saying, they don't have much to stretch your credibility, but right. They have the client that they do. They have the fact pattern that they do. But it is in terms of, if you say, well, is this what competent lawyering looks like? It's like, yeah, by and large, with a few reasons for various causes, primarily Donald Trump's whim, they're decent attorneys on both sides.
Yeah, I agree. And there were some other standout moments we talked a little bit about last week, but I know that when you and I were texting back and forth, one of your favorite parts was when he had to sit there. That this is hard for Trump, right? And I'm not trying to cry him a river or play a violin bigger than my thumbnail, but like for him, he's got a max few hours in him to be out in public using his words and talking with humans. Beyond that, he gets very fidgety. We know that there's people I know Alyssa Farrow Griffin, Miles Taylor, a lot of people who've worked with him in the past tried to brief him, like with the President's Daily Brief, came in and talked a little bit on MSNBC about how he can't sit still. And so this is like torturous for him.
Yeah, and look, the trial is playing to all of his weaknesses, and it's true. Like multiple briefers that I talked to said, you could not get the man to pay attention. He would rarely talk about what it was that you had brought up, and would inevitably rapidly veer off to something that he wanted to talk about. And so, not only is there's both a physical and mental incapacity to sit still and focus and pay attention. So when you have that sort of person who also likes to spin yarns, to tell contradictory statements in the same sentence, to lie his butt off, the prospect of having to sit in trial, not say a word, maybe successfully, maybe unsuccessfully stay awake, but listen to things that he definitely doesn't like, particularly during voir dire when some of the, nasty, tweets and other posts were being read about him. But at the end of the day, hearing things that he is very upset about, not being able to respond. And it's not like he can then go out and talk to Hannity or talk to the media, because the media is in the room. So people know what is being said. He can't BS folks and saying, oh, we had a great meeting and they said, sir, with tears in their eyes, you were the best, president. He can't do that because we all know what was said. So it's like just all his swords are, blunted, all his shields are taken away. It is something I think where, for him, it's not an ideal. Federal trial would be much better for him without, the same ability to rapidly talk about what's going on in the courtroom. He'll have a little bit better ability to spin about what was said. So this is not, is it like Fulton County where we could all dial into the Zoom and see the trial if we ever get a trial date in Fulton County? No, but it is not something where he's in his element.
Yeah, no, definitely not. And that's fine with me. That's one of the things you have to do when you're a criminal defendant is sit there. And you're not the boss. And I think that that's really hitting home from him. All right, we still have a contempt hearing to go over, a second contempt hearing to go over, and then the testimony of a couple of other witnesses. But we have to take a quick break, so everybody stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, welcome back. We have more new patrons to thank. Jan, Robin Ray, Antonio Ferranetti, Allie M., Mr. RJH, Jody Wilhelm, and Cheryl Johnson. Thank all of you for your support. Thank you. You are just amazing folks. We could not do this program without your support. And just thank you from the bottom of our heart. So before we get to the other two witnesses that were called to the stand in the first week, let's talk about the contempt hearing, which we're still, as we tape, waiting for some sort of, for something from Judge Merchant. But he spent last week, Tuesday morning, hearing arguments on Trump's alleged violation of the gag order in what's called a show cause hearing. But he did not issue a ruling on Thursday when court came back into session. And remember, the court takes Wednesdays off throughout this entire process. Now, then prosecutors submitted another motion to hold Trump in contempt for 3 additional violations of the gag order over the previous 3 days, including one where he called Pecker nice. Chris Conroy said for the prosecution, quote, "This is a message to Pecker. Be nice." It's a message to others as well. And so then Merchant announced at the end of the day that he would hold a hearing on that motion this Thursday. Now, the maximum penalty for a gag order violations in New York is $1,000 per violation or 30 days in jail.
Yeah, and Pete, I think it might have been Andrew Weissman discussing the fact that perhaps not ruling on the contempt might be the strongest tool that the judge has to keep Trump quiet, like holding that sort of Damocles over his head. If he rules and he's like $1,000 a piece, it'll just keep happening. I mean, it's going to keep happening anyway. But there are other things he could do. He could say, we're going to give you 30 days in jail, which you have to serve after trial. Or we're going to calculate all these fines and rack them all up and give them to you after trial. Or just sort of hold it over his head a little bit so that he doesn't know exactly what's coming. But I'm sure his lawyers are aware that the max is $1,000 per penalty or 30 days in jail. But, honestly, that may be the best tool that the judge has here to prevent him from going way off the rails. Because he went from 10 violations just down to 3. So, maybe not ruling is working a little bit.
He's only driving drunk 3 days out of the week, not 2 days a week. Look, I got a couple of problems with that, right? Well, one is this is an escalatory process. It is not typically the kind of thing where the judge starts out throwing the book at you saying, go directly to jail for 30 days. Usually a prudent judge is going to sit there and start by saying, stop, or I'm going to refine my, order so that that retweeting somebody is in fact also barred. You can't just, adopt somebody else's statements and say, oh, this isn't subject to the gag order.
Right. So you're right. He hasn't even clarified reposts and requotes.
Right. Which seems absurd, right? For reasons we talked about in prior pods about, Trump didn't just retweet, he rewrote. But so there has to be an escalation process. And if you don't start that process, you can't get to the worst sanction because if you've never done the beginning thing, and there is no way that Trump is going to listen to Michael Cohen or listen to Stormy Daniels and not say something. Guarantee it. So if you wait until then and you watch Trump explode, and then your first thing is like, well, you've done all these things and I'm fine, Dr. Evil Pinky in the mouth, fining you $17,000. Trump could give a damn, right? So you have to begin that escalatory process. And it should, in my opinion, have occurred for the second problem I have with this. No other defendant would have this benefit. You would not, I would not, a CEO of a Wall Street company, a drug lord, nobody else in the United States of America, if they tried to pull this sort of crap in a courtroom in the New York State system, and a judge as serious as Judge Merchan is, nobody else would enjoy that sort of deference. So why time and time and time again do we have to have our noses collectively as the American people shoved into a pile of poo about how Trump gets treated differently day in and day out? At least it's not Kristi Noem taking us into the goddamn gravel pit and shooting us. But why do we have to constantly have our noses rubbed in the way Trump perpetually gets a different standard of justice than literally any other person in America?
No, I agree. And I've had entire shows dedicated to that fact on the Daily Beans. I know I've interviewed Glenn Kirshner about it, who repeatedly says that, we're treating him as though he's above the law. And of course, we've got 4 bought and paid for, at least, Supreme Court justices who think he's above all the laws. And we'll see what the Supreme Court has to say about that and immunity. That's maybe later this summer. If it's later, I just love it, especially if it's later this summer. It's ridiculous. And he's already won that battle just because he got the delay that he wanted to get. Now, according to The Guardian, Rhona Graff's testimony humanized the trial. That's what the Guardian said, reminding the courtroom that at its core, these proceedings center on an adult film actor named Stormy Daniels, as well as a man who is either flawed or fraudulent. And now they say a key moment in prosecutor Susan Hoffinger's questioning of Rhona Graff revealed that Trump's contacts, his quote-unquote Rolodex, contained an entry for Karen McDougal and an entry for someone named Stormy. And it was interesting to see. They actually showed them that Karen McDougal's was like, Karen McDougal, phone number 1, phone number 2, here's her address, d. And Stormy's just said Stormy, phone number. Like, it was kind of illustrative of the difference in the relationships between the two, indicating Stormy Daniels was a fling, a one-night stand, a short-lived relationship, maybe a couple different nights, and that Karen McDougal was almost a year-long relationship in which, when she got on TV and did that interview, which also upset Trump, she said that, they were in love. And I think that that's what you were alluding to when you said that it's probably going to be way worse for Trump's private life when Karen McDougal gets on the stand. She's also extremely credible. I know that when she did that interview, a lot of people really believed what she had to say. And she was very, well spoken about it. Graff also testified that she had a vague recollection of Stormy Daniels appearing at the reception area on the 26th floor of Trump Tower. This is well before the election. But it was kind of known through the office that Stormy Daniels might be a potential contestant for The Apprentice, but everybody knew she was an adult film star. And so during cross-examination of Rhona Graff, Susan Nicholas, who's one of Trump's attorneys, worked very hard to downplay Daniels' presence there at Trump Tower, trying to focus on what I just said, she was a contestant on The Apprentice, et cetera. And then she had Graff describe how Trump would occasionally sign checks while he was preoccupied or multitasking, not paying attention, seemingly trying to establish that Trump was just distracted when he signed 18 checks, some from the Oval Office, to Michael Cohen for legal expenses, which is one of the lies, one of the falsifications in those business documents. So I don't know. I if I'm a juror, I'm like, oh, please.
Yeah, and some of the interesting thing, talking about those checks in the Oval Office, apparently also came out in testimony that some of the people present during those Oval Office sessions included the current governor of the state of Arkansas, famous for Lectern Gate, that none other than Sarah Huckabee Sanders apparently was party to some of these goings on. So I don't think we will see Governor Huckabee Sanders on the stand, but for this godly family coming from the Christian values, Mike Huckabee patriarch, There's a lot of bending those. I don't. My last reading of the Bible, I didn't see the part about how are we going to quash this story about the payments to the porn star. Maybe that's the 11th commandment. I forgot about, or I missed in CCD. But
no, I think it's the 11th circle of hell.
There's enough in Trump land to fill the entire basin. 1 through 10, 11. Let's add. Yes.
It'll be like, what's the movie where they turn it up to 11?
Yeah, Spinal Tap. Yeah, the circles of hell. Dante, no, the 10 circle. No, this goes to 11.
This is Dante's Spinal Tap.
Yes, Dante's Spinal Tap. Trump hell. Yeah, and we can all think about what constitutes the 11th circle. The Covfefe is the 11th circle.
And it's a Scaramucci. It's the 11th is the Scaramucci.
on the last day of trial, the prosecution called Gary Farrow to the stand. Now, Gary Farrow is a former senior managing director at First Republic Bank. Farrow worked at First Republic Bank when Cohen used his own home equity line from the bank to pay the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels. I've got a home equity line of credit. It's nowhere near $130,000. I mean, the whole thing stinks so bad. Now, going back to Farrow's testimony, Michael Avenatti, had provided an email to CNN in 2018 that showed a First Republic Bank employee confirming the deposit to Cohen, who used his personal and TrumpOrg.com email accounts. The bank employee who confirmed the deposit was an assistant to Farrow. So that's the Farrow link.
Yeah, so that's where we are. It'll be interesting to see who's coming up next. The prosecution has been careful not to announce its next witnesses. Again, like I said, out of concern that Trump will attack them publicly, which says it all. So the witness list and the order of the witnesses being held very close. But who do you think might be coming next?
You know what might help that fear of Trump attacking them publicly? If they enforce the gag order. If they enforce the gag order. If Trump was on the end of his first week at Rikers with the Secret Service to help him put on his bronzer, perhaps he would not be as likely to attack.
Well, we did get confirmation that the Secret Service was having meetings on what to do if jail was ordered in a contempt decision. But like you said, the judges generally don't start out with jail. So we'll see what happens.
Right. So who knows? I mean, I don't think, my sense is next we will get some combination of the people, perhaps Hope Hicks. I don't know necessarily what Hope Hicks gets you that hasn't been introduced there. You've got to start showing the reason why this was potentially politically damaging for Trump and the reason why he was doing it for that purpose, why it was important to the campaign. So certainly Cohen is going to be critical to that. Are they going to be able to work in Daniels and McDougal? Do they need to do that? I don't think Cohen is next because my sense is that he may be like the last or penultimate witness. I think we have more to go, but we've got a lot of paperwork, right? Somebody's going to have to sit down there and, the checks that you were talking about earlier that, whether or not he was just sitting there, somebody's going to have to walk through sort of the more, what Farrow started doing about, let's talk about the movement of money, how it happened, where it came from, where the reimbursements might have come from, what was Trump's state of mind when he was reimbursing it. I think the next prong or sort of narrative thread is going to be the financial data, maybe stuff a little less, glamorous in terms of interest, but something very critical to what they have to prove.
Yeah, I think they might bring up the other assistant, that had Trump sign the checks. But also, when you look at the way that the prosecutors laid out the David Pecker testimony, they started with Karen McDougal because that's chronologically what happened, right? The doorman and Karen McDougal. Then Pecker didn't get reimbursed. Then Cohen goes and gets this money. So maybe they'll go through the documents and then go through McDougal, the doorman, and Stormy, and then perhaps bring in Cohen to just confirm everything. But they might need to bring him in as a foundation to get the documents in. But they also could do that with this banker guy. So it'll be interesting to see which direction they go. My guess is the next big witness will be Karen McDougal. She'll be the first of the storytelling witnesses, I think, because that's the order in which they questioned David Pecker, and it's the chronological order in which these things happened.
Yeah, and that's, again, for anybody, for a juror that you're trying to explain something, explaining things in a chronological way is frequently, I mean, particularly when you have a not necessarily hugely complex, but it is a very logical, again, we're all story listeners, and one of the best ways to tell a story is to have a chronological unfolding of events. You can, get people who play around with concepts, or, you go watch Memento and it's amazing, bouncing back and forth and warping time. But we are designed to absorb a story in a chronological way. So I think you're right. I think that's there. But we may need more nuts and bolts about the financials before we get into the event. But, we'll find out as dear listeners, as you're listening to this, you will know, because while court was dark today, we're in session tomorrow, Tuesday, as we tape. So you're going to know who is next.
Yep, absolutely. All right. We'll keep staying on top of this trial and reporting it. Of course, we'll have a bonus episode this weekend for patrons. If you're a patron of this show at the $2 level, obviously you get twice as many episodes. We'll talk a little bit about it and probably something else that we wouldn't normally bring up on the public episode. But for this show, we still have to talk about some of these state cases. And we're going to do that. And we have some breaking news as well about the cheese. So we're going to do that as soon as we take a quick break. Everybody stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, welcome back. We have more new patrons to thank. John P., Andrea Noble-Stuen, Phil Casey, J. Daniel Christensen and the Christensens, Rebecca Martin, Sawmill is number 1, Can't Be number 2, Come on all you seals, do the Sawmill Bugaloo. So, thank you. It's extraordinarily important that as patrons, you are there, and we thank you for that. You make all of this possible. Thank all of you so much. So, with that said, Allison, we've got some breaking news right now as we're recording this on Monday afternoon. And this whole story segues nicely into our discussion about the state cases. This breaking news comes from CNN, and let's go to the big board and spin the wheel of states. And it turns out we are going to land on Michigan. Google and X, formerly Twitter, recently provided hundreds of files to Michigan prosecutors for their 2020 election subversion probe, complying with search warrants the investigators obtained after CNN revealed secret social media accounts belonging to pro-Trump lawyer Kenneth Chesebro played a major role in the fake electors plot. The previously unreported warrants gave prosecutors access to new Chesebro emails and his private direct messages on Twitter. The warrants make clear that Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel is still gathering new information in her probe 9 months after she charged the state's fake electors with forgery and other crimes for signing certificates falsely claiming Donald Trump won the state in 2020. A top member of her team testified last week that the investigation is ongoing and that Trump is an unindicted co-conspirator in the case, which is not expected to go to trial before the November election.
Yeah, no way. And they go on to say that according to these new documents provided to Michigan prosecutors, pursuant to these search warrants, first of all, these documents were obtained by CNN. Chesebro fruitlessly tried to bring several controversial pro-Trump figures to D.C. to watch his, quote, fake electors strategy unfold on January 6th. He offered to pay airfare and lodging at Trump's upscale D.C. hotel for former Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark. Remember that guy with all the flair?
Oh, my God, yes. Yes, and
as well as
random pins on his sheriff's uniform. Yes.
If you want me to wear 37 pieces of flair, just make the minimum 37 pieces of flair. Also, the founder of Gateway Pundit, he wanted to bring him. It doesn't appear that anyone accepted his offers. These messages also show how Chesebro aggressively reached out to conservative pundits and right-wing figures after Trump lost the election, prodding them to publicly promote his long-shot theories for how to subvert the Electoral College process. The search warrants to Google and Twitter were executed just in March, last month, shortly after CNN reported that Chesebro had concealed some of his social media accounts. Remember Pundit Badger Pundit or whatever? Mm-hmm. His sock account? And he hid those from prosecutors during his cooperation sessions last year. Chesebro has not been charged in Michigan, and he has pled guilty in Georgia's election interference probe. So, interesting.
Yeah, and I'm really curious because you'll remember, too, Chesebro down in Arizona is an unindicted co-conspirator, in no small part when we talked about it. And God, it feels like 2 years ago, but it was probably 6 months. He cooperated.
Well, kind of.
He went out, he asked Fulton County for leave to go travel as part of his bail conditions to go and talk to prosecutors in Arizona and elsewhere. And so he has gotten out of criminal trouble by, appearing to comply and appearing to be cooperative. And the question is, is there material in this sock puppet account that is going to turn what he's been saying on its head and place him in a whole new round of hot water? I would hope he's not so dumb as to do that, but this is the Trump apparatus. So I guess nothing would surprise me at this point. So it's interesting. There's so much going on in so many states. And what's interesting with Michigan is like they had, as you indicated, they were only looking at state officials. And unlike Arizona, which we'll talk about in a little bit, they hadn't really looked at these national level figures, but now they're getting search warrants for Chesebro. They are definitely looking at national figures. So I am very curious to see.
And Trump is an unindicted co-conspirator. We learned this week.
I'm very curious to see, and starting with Michigan, and a great resource, Lawfare, the place where Anna Bauer works, founded by a guy named Ben Wittes, who's just a great all-around person and bright. They have a great summary of all the state cases. And so starting with Michigan, they note that way back, and it was almost, coming up on 10 months, I guess, on July 18th, 2023, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel announced felony charges against 16 Michigan residents for their alleged involvement in the fake elector scheme. Now, each of the defendants faces 8 charges: 1 count of conspiracy to commit forgery, 2 counts of forgery, 1 count of conspiracy to commit uttering and publishing, 1 count of uttering and publishing, 1 count of conspiracy to commit election law forgery, and 2 counts of election law forgery. The latter 2 statutes carry a penalty of up to 5 years in prison, and the other crimes are punishable with up to 14 years. Now, initially, all the defendants pleaded not guilty, but in October 2023, the Attorney General announced a cooperation deal with one James Renner, one of the fake electors, and dropped all criminal charges against him. Then, on October 6th, 2023, Judge Simmons denied the defendant's motion to dismiss, concluding that Nessel's comments were speculation and insufficient to dismiss the charges at this point in the case. But the judge did, however, leave open the possibility of re-examining the impact of Nessel's comments on the criminal charges later in the trial.
Yeah, I don't think that'll go anywhere. But that's where we are with Michigan. And Trump and Ellis and Rudy are all unindicted co-conspirators in that case, per that one guy's testimony during some of the preliminary hearings in Michigan. Over in Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Elections Commission has twice rejected a complaint requesting the bipartisan commission to investigate the 10 fake electors. Under Wisconsin law, the commission has the power to investigate potential violations of election law and rules in Wisconsin, and upon finding that a violation has occurred, the commission can impose civil penalties or refer the case to the DA for criminal prosecution. The complaint, filed by the nonprofit organization Law Forward in February of 2021, a month after the insurrection, alleged that the fake electors violated Wisconsin election law by attempting to cast Wisconsin's electoral college votes for Trump. Now, in late December 2023, a full 2 years later, Law Forward and the fake electors reached a settlement agreement. This includes an acknowledgement from each fake elector that Biden fairly won, and a notification to the relevant government offices that the electoral certificates were fake, and a prospective ban on each elector from serving as a presidential elector in 2024 and any other election with Trump on the ballot. The fake electors, however, were not required to admit wrongdoing or pay any of the $2.4 million in punitive damages sought by Law Forward. But then 2 months later, Law Forward reached a second settlement with the remaining defendants, Chesebro and Troupis. Under this settlement, both defendants admit their conduct was improper and an improper attempt to overturn the illegitimate 2020 election results in Wisconsin, and that they will refrain from participating in election certification and selection of electors, quote, unless certified as the persons elected as presidential electors under state law. The settlement also required the individuals to release a large tranche of previously unseen communications between Chesebro, Troupis, Trump campaign officials, and Wisconsin Republicans. We've seen a lot of those. December also saw the first stirrings of a possible state criminal investigation against the fake electors. That month, in December, CNN reported Chesebro was cooperating with state-level investigators, prosecutors in Wisconsin, as well as Michigan, Nevada, and Arizona. Chesebro's cooperation represented the first indication that the state attorney general's office has actually launched its own investigation into the false slates of pro-Trump electors, but no other details have been reported out of Wisconsin.
Yeah, and if that wasn't enough, pivoting to Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's fake electors have not faced prosecution, nor are they likely to in the future. Key to the conclusion from state authorities was a caveat included in the Pennsylvania certification documents, which stated that the certificate would be considered valid only if later the courts, quote, determined that we are the duly elected and qualified electors, unquote, of the state. And
Smart.
then in Nevada, they were smart, right? Somebody like had some common sense or listened to an attorney.
The contingency language, right?
Yeah, and put that in there, and so they're protected in a lot of ways that the other folks aren't. Now in Nevada, in December 2023, a grand jury indicted 6 defendants, all of whom signed their names as Trump electors for their involvement in the fake elector scheme. The 6 are currently awaiting trial for state felony criminal charges. The 6 fake electors initially avoided criminal charges after Attorney General Aaron Ford determined that state laws did not cover the fake elector scheme. Despite Ford's initial findings, a grand jury indicted the fake electors in December 2023. The 6 fake electors are each charged with offering a false instrument for filing and uttering a forged instrument. They face nearly a decade in prison and $15,000 in fines if convicted on both counts. Their trial was originally set for March 2024, but guess what? It's been delayed until January 2025.
Much like the federal case. And down to New Mexico, they recently concluded an investigation and determined that the Trump campaign did work closely with the state Republican Party to submit a fraudulent slate of electors. The Trump campaign supplied the 5 fake New Mexico electors with the fake electoral certificate, as well as with guidance for finishing and submitting it to the National Archives. But the New Mexico fake electors are also unlikely to face criminal penalties because they also put that contingency language on their certificate, much like they did in Pennsylvania. And then over to Arizona. Arizona is in the unique position of having had 2 different slates of fake electors, one associated with the state's Republican Party and another associated with a group called the Sovereign Citizens of the great state of Arizona. Attorney General Chris Mays, opened investigations into both slates of fake electors after she took office in January of 2023. Remember, she didn't get there until 2023. And the Brnovich, the Republican Attorney General, didn't investigate. This past week, as we know, a grand jury handed up indictments on 18 co-conspirators, including 2 who haven't been indicted up until this point, Boris Epshteyn and Christina Bobb. And here's some really great irony. Bob was just hired as the election integrity czar for the Republican National Committee.
Of course she was.
Now, 2 of the indicted electors are current Arizona state senators. By the way, Republicans have a 2-seat majority in the state Senate. All 30 are up for re-election this year. And in some late-breaking news, one of those senators, Jake Hoffman, was just elected as the RNC National Committee man for the state of Arizona. So that's 2 indicted people working for the RNC. And of course, we know what's going on in Fulton County and how they handled their investigation. 19 co-defendants. And so very interesting how the different states are handling these. And congrats to Lawfare and thank you for putting together. There's a lot more, by the way, in that article. I suggest everybody go check out Lawfare and contribute if you can, because the work they're doing is pretty incredible.
Yeah. And so, look, we've got 5 states where there are criminal charges. Setting aside the 2 that don't. You've got Michigan, you've got Wisconsin, you've got Nevada, you've got Arizona, and then, of course, in New Mexico. So that's
Georgia.
Georgia. I'm sorry, Georgia, not New Mexico. New Mexico is they had the qualification statement. So those 5, it's beyond what's going to be super interesting to me. And again, we've talked about this before on earlier podcasts. When you start looking, these states weren't just having crime happen in the abstract isolation of their particular state. You start seeing, and now particularly with the Michigan expansion into search warrants for Chesebro stuff, there is a national connective tissue that made all of this illegal activity in these 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I need another hand if we get another state, 5 different states, was driven from a national perspective. And I understand, or believe at least, he's never stated one way or the other, Jack Smith, about why he only indicted Donald Trump. It would be, in my opinion, a travesty if there were not federal indictments of some of these folks, because I do not see any way, shape, or form that when you have this much state-level criminal election alleged criminal behavior, that there is not also a federal crime going on. And we've got Trump charged at the top. We have co-conspirator, unindicted co-conspirator 1 through 6 identified in Jack Smith's Trump charging document. I sure hope one day we get to see a robust speaking indictment from the feds, from federal prosecutors, about all these people who were absolutely critical in pulling off this national conspiracy. And in my opinion, we need it. In my opinion, even if Trump is elected in November, DOJ needs to get an indictment out there so the facts at least are on the record. Even if Trump disbands Jack Smith, even if Trump causes all the federal cases to go away, get that indictment out there. Because there's no way that these folks that we're seeing coming up time and time and time again, in my opinion, did not violate federal criminal laws. And they need to be charged federally, and they need to be held accountable.
Yeah, I think they will be charged federally, whether it's right after the election if Trump wins or after the Trump trial if Trump doesn't. And again, I think Andy and I have talked about this quite a bit. A lot of legal experts say that the reason they haven't been indicted is because if you do indict them, they'll file motions to consolidate with Trump's case, and then they'll be approved. And then because it's the same criminal conspiracy, and then there'll be all kinds of pretrial motions, potentially interlocutory appeals, and the whole thing, including the Trump trial, would be delayed well into next year. So I really think Jack Smith is trying to get the Trump trial done first and then bring up these, what Andy called mop-up cases. But we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. And we also will get a report at some point. You have to remember he's going to file a full report, which I think will be considerably more robust than what Mueller put out, and which ended up being 600 pages. So anyway, because the conspiracy is huge and it involves so many people and 7 states and people from the Department of Justice and all of these national figures that you talked about at multiple levels of this conspiracy. So all right, we still have a couple of cleanup stories to get to, but we have to take one last quick break. Everybody stick around. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. We have our last list of new patrons to thank, and it includes Megan, Colleen Hicks, Fran Slater, Deb Norman, Terry, and Vicky Schmillen. Thank you so, so much. We couldn't do this without you. And thanks for supporting independent media in general. Seriously, what a cool thing to do, especially in these times where there seems to be like the media is stuck on horse race journalism and rage farming. So we appreciate you so much. We have a few other quick stories to cover. First up, Jim Comer has admitted privately to his Republican colleagues that the Biden impeachment is stupid and it's going nowhere. And he's very upset that they don't have the votes. And, we still watch this in some of these hearings. We see Moskowitz come in and double dare, triple dog dare him to vote, have an impeachment vote right now. And it never goes anywhere. We also saw the Mayorkas impeachment articles tank in the Senate and that trial be adjourned. So it's just been a nowhere game, which is, and again, like most Trump lawsuits and most Trump investigations, it wasn't intended to go anywhere. Just investigate, just say you're investigating and leave the rest to us. Just the mere existence of an investigation is enough for Donald Trump to spread his false, his misinformation. So that's what's going on with Comer.
Yeah, and Moskowitz also took to Twitter to send a breakup email or a tweet essentially saying, I was so sad that our relationship has to come to an end, that, I'll always, wish you nothing but the best. And it was just a smart ass till the end. So that was...
It's not me, it's you. Yeah.
Yeah. Good to see. And guess what, Allison? The Supreme Court, having heard from Peter Navarro again, denied his attempt in his letter to get Justice Gorsuch to let him out of jail. Denied without comment in a brief, terse, short, one-sentence order. Pete, you got to stay in jail. for another couple of months yet. So sorry, buddy. Hope the canteen's working out for you. I still have not put together my care package for him on behalf of the cleanup crowd, but we'll get to that. We'll send it. We've got a few more months. So
he's hoarding Oreos for the sock, but because first he asked just the Supreme Court, hey, stay this. And Roberts was like, no. And he's like, how about you, Gorsuch? I wonder if he's going to file another one for Kavanaugh.
Go down the list.
Yeah, just go down the list.
Saving Alito and Clarence for the very bitter end.
Alito would be the first one I would turn to if I were him, but none of them are going to take any of this up. Also, OANN, One America News Network, has issued an apology to Michael Cohen as part of its settlement agreement. They had to retract their stories and apologize for saying that Cohen had an affair with Stormy Daniels. So that first apology went out from OANN. We're going to see a lot of these soon.
Yeah, and talking about Cohen, I mean, he's been out talking about Trump on TikTok and Twitter, and ABC reported that, look, for the first few days of the trial, he was out there talking all kinds of garbage, but he seems to have gotten some sort of legal advice and Cohen put out a statement that he would no longer be commenting on the trial. ABC said, as he awaits his turn to take the witness stand, Cohen has discussed Trump, the ongoing trial, and the testimony already underway during the nightly live streams on TikTok, which appear to be earning him financial benefit through viewers' donations, according to hours of his streams viewed by ABC News. Now, in a statement to ABC News on Monday, Cohen said, I'm going to stop. He would cease commenting on Trump and, quote unquote, this matter. And of course, he couldn't help himself and continued, quote, I'm not the defendant in this criminal matter, and I am not the subject of Judge Merchan's gag order. Donald is. Nevertheless, I elected, out of respect to the court and the prosecutors, to cease commenting on Trump and this matter, which I have done. All true. I hope it might have occurred prior to ABC going through and watching and reporting on TikTok live streams where he says, something like, it's not Trump 2024, it's Trump 20 to 24 years. You don't need your key witness saying things like that. I cannot envision the amount of frustration in the prosecutor's office about his statements, but he's made, in my opinion, the right decision and is just going to stop talking about it. And that is nothing but a good thing.
Yeah, and as Carrie Bradshaw would say, I can't help but wonder if it was actually like maybe George Conway who called him up and was like, bro.
Dude, shut up. Yeah.
Stop talking.
Zip it,
please. Simadana. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. One last thing here. We've been kind of trying to figure out and talk about what was going on with Steve Bannon's We Build the Wall Manhattan DA case. Remember? He was federally arrested. He was arrested on Guo Wengwei's yacht, by the way, by the post office cops. And eventually, he was pardoned for all of that. He is named as an unindicted co-conspirator in that Guo Wengwei case. We learned that this week. But he was also prosecuted by the Manhattan District Attorney for this case. And the trial was set to start in a couple of days, I think, next month, May of 2024. But they have postponed it until September. And I know everyone's like, oh man, justice delayed, et cetera, et cetera. Yes. However, that trial is being presided over by none other than Justice Juan Merchan. And he is kind of busy at the moment. So it makes sense that they would push this trial back to September. So that's what's happening in the Bannon trial. We will keep you posted. As far as I know, he hasn't paid any of his lawyers and everybody's suing him. And nobody's really quite sure what's going on with discovery or anything like that. He's just not complying with anything. And we'll see. But September is the new trial date for one Steve Bannon. So that'll be fun. Right before the election. It'll be cool. All right. That's the show. Unless you have any final thoughts or if there's any last minute breaking news. I think I got a text message just now saying that Rudy Giuliani is telling Mike Johnson and Jim Jordan to do exactly what Trump was impeached for. Quote, somebody should lean on Zelensky. If you want to get another penny, give us your Biden files. So he's actually calling.
Rudy, double down, Rudy. I'm sure he's going to go call his assistant and start making inappropriate comments about her physical attributes. I'm sure tonight after he's like, yes, he's got to few martinis down, and the night is only looking up. But come on, Rudy.
Boy.
Come
Yeah,
on, now, Rudy. What are you doing? What are you doing?
His bankruptcy trial's not going well for him. They've served Andrew Giuliani trying to get take the temperature of his assets that he's hiding, the group of creditors that he owes money to, which includes Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. So that's not going to go well for him, and the rest of his life is going to suck. So enjoy that final thought for me. And we will be back in your ears this weekend with our Cleanup on Aisle 45 bonus episode for patrons. If you want to become a patron, patreon.com/aisle45pod, AISLE45POD. We're going to have probably another cool gathering at a different location in DC, maybe later this year or early next year. We'll keep you posted on that. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all out again. It was so much fun in DC last Saturday. Thank you so much to everybody who made it out. You all went above and beyond and just blew my mind with your support. So thank you.
Yeah, 100%. I just, it is humbling and also key and critical to the success of putting the show together. But thank each and every one of you. Got a ton of stuff going on. I mean, we talked about, 5 states just for Trump and the fake electors. Not including all the Trump stuff going on. So there's a ton to keep track of. We can only do that because of your support. So thank all of you so very much for that.
Yeah. All right, everybody. We'll see you this weekend and then next week on the main episode. I've been Allison Gill.
And I'm Pete Strzok.
Cleanup on Aisle 45 is written, researched, and produced by Allison Gill with editing by Molly Hockey. Our art and logo design are by Joelle Reeder and Moxie Design Studios, and our music is composed and performed by Adam Orr. Cleanup on Aisle 45 is a proud member of the MSW Media Network, a collection of creator-owned podcasts dedicated to news, politics, and justice. For more information, visit mswmedia.com. MSW Media.